collect. Okay, so now it says you are being recorded, so now you know, and now I can officially say, Quinn, welcome to UVU, and you were talking about your bio, and
Yes.
please proceed.
But yes, as I said, I started out as an actress. I grew up on film sets and, had a pretty normal childhood otherwise. I went to public school. My mom would take me into the city for auditions as a kid. And then when I was 12, I started taking like some filmmaking courses that were just like a pull-out program. And I grew up in New Jersey. And so they were like a public school pull-out program for the arts, which was sort of the first time that I had access to like really nice filmmaking equipment and sound equipment and cameras. And so I was definitely really intrigued, and I started making short films then. So I made like a short film every year. And I remember feeling like
starting at 12? Starting
oh yeah. I think I was very passionate about it, almost too passionate, where I think I had a very serious conversation when I was like 13 with my parents, where I was like, I don't think I can do this. It stresses me out too much. I was like, I think I care too much about this. But I just like was really in love with the way that filmmaking blends all of the different art forms, because I was very passionate about writing, performing, music, visual, everything. And I just think it's incredible how film brings it all together. And so, yeah, I just loved film and grew up watching so many great movies and old films. And when I was 15, I did a production of The Crucible at like a local theater. And I actually genuinely did, like, the role had a really big impact on like my own coming of age, in the sense that like I think really projected a lot of kind of discovering like your own power and that sort of thing, like into my experience playing the character. And at that age, I thought it was really interesting because I hadn't seen a coming of age story that I related to that was kind of about those topics in the media anywhere. And I was like, oh, I think this would be an interesting story, obviously fictionalized and taken and exaggerated quite a bit. But I wrote the first draft of the film when I was 15, when I was in high school. And then I worked on it like all through high school as like kind of a form of art therapy. I mean, it was not good, the first draft. It was very embarrassing. And yeah, and it was just like a major piece of art therapy for me that I worked on for a lot of years. And then we filmed it when I was 20. So quite a bit down the road from there.
Wow, so you filmed it when did you say you filmed it when you were 20?
Yeah.
Blame?
Yes.
Okay, wow. Now that you've gotten that out of your system, now that you've worked through all those weird childhood angsty issues, what's next? What are you working on?
So I have had the last 2 years I spent developing. I have a film and 2 television shows that I had in development. Unfortunately, neither of the shows I think are moving forward at the moment. TV development is very confusing, very long, but really rewarding. And I learned honestly like so much throughout that process. And with my film, I have another film that is moving forward right now that hopefully we'll be shooting this year. And yeah, unfortunately I can't share that much about anything, but and yeah, it's sort of like with writing and development, because I typically am signing on to projects that I want to write and direct, and I like to direct my own material. It's just a longer process from like script to execution than if I was to say like pitch on projects as a director that were already like greenlit. So yeah, it's just been really interesting adjusting from being a kid who did not really know. I produced the film with my mom. Neither of us had any experience as producers. And so we learned everything on the shoot. And it's just been like a really interesting ride, because I did it, I think, before I had any of the knowledge of like the normal way to do it. We definitely did not do the normal approach. Like everything went wrong and everything. It was crazy. Like everything about the way that the film was made was really unconventional, and everything was very low budget. And so now it's been really interesting to get like a completely other side of it, where that film has become like what I used as, for meetings and to get jobs, and now approaching it from like we started script with producers and the whole process. So yeah.
Tell me about, I've got, if you guys have questions, start queuing up here. I've got just two more. We'll just do it this way. You are on a great big like screen here. That's how that works in case you didn't know.
That's terrifying.
Well, you were just on a big screen for an hour and a half. I'm not sure what your problem is. So I've got my first so one of the things I like, not, yeah, you can, okay. So one of my first questions is about the editing. One of my favorite things about the movie is the editing. I think the editing is fantastic, and I didn't notice at first that you had edited it. And so tell me about editing and how you learned to do it. There's three like really great sequences. There's the sort of bait and switch sex sequence, which is just fantastic, and then the whole final climax is so great, with the going back and forth between your performances and Melissa's moment. So just tell me about editing and some of your choices and how you sort of honed that craft.
Of course. Yeah. Again, I think I did approach it. Because I didn't go to film school, I don't really have any formal training in anything. With editing, I started teaching myself when I was really young because I used to cut all the shorts that I made when I was like in school, in iMovie. And then as I got, I cut the film. That was actually my first time using Premiere, was editing the feature. But I kind of knew, like, I would always like write to friends and call friends who were professionals and be like, I want to make sure I'm not like doing something technically wrong and I'm going to mess all of this up. But I feel like for me, like I knew I was going to go to like a very professional post house. And so I just wanted the edit like of the raw footage to just be very much based on like pacing and emotion and performance. And, initially we had talked about hiring an editor, but we genuinely had no money. And I was a little bit daunted by the idea of editing it myself because I was like, oh my God, like I have no experience doing this. But I was like, I think I know what the movie is enough that hopefully I can bring that. And so, I did it on my laptop. My mom and I would sit and watch dailies and talk through the scenes for like hours. I mean, it took a really long time. I would say we spent I would say maybe like 7 to 9 months doing cuts and between the rough cut, doing test screenings, we did a lot of screenings with people who didn't know anything about the film, like, friends of friends, and we would get feedback. And it was so fascinating to see how you can manipulate the audience. Like, I will never forget, like, the very first test audience we did not get the ending and did not understand the twist at all. And we went back in and we added one ADR line and a close-up and a music cue, and it never happened again. And it was so interesting to see how like there was such subtle, because of course we're screening it with like raw sound, temp score, but you could really see how people, like, we'd have a screening and a character would be read as like, we'd have anonymous surveys and people would, like, if someone was too unlikable and people were really angry about a scene or they were bored during a scene, we would go and we'd make tiny tweaks, and then all of a sudden we'd be getting completely different feedback just because we went with like a different take of 2 of the lines, or we cut to a reaction shot here. It was really fascinating. I just loved that process. I think editing was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole process because I just loved it.
Specifically, what ADR line did you put in?
Oh my gosh. It was I think it was so small. I think when she was like, don't touch me, I think we added in a line where she's like, don't let him touch me, or something very small that was like just to drive it home a little bit harder, because it was
just
like,
in case you missed it.
Yeah, it was pretty clear in the scripts. I think there might have been one other tiny one. I'm blanking on it at the moment. I think it was, I think it might have also just been with the police officer, like cutting to him being like putting things together. It was like things like that where it was just, like really small tweaks.
Okay, my last question, we have a long line here. It's like 10:30 her time. She's in New York. So, or 10 or 11, right? So, thus she's drinking a lot of coffee.
Oh yeah, it's my tea. Because I always use my voice.
And we'll go until you say I can't do this anymore, or we get bored. That might happen too. So, the one question I want to ask, because I know no one's bold enough, is I want to know your approach and how you felt about directing yourself in a sex scene.
Oh yeah. So that was really interesting. It was super weird, but at the same time also like I think very empowering because as an actress, I've been in like quite a few situations where I was like, this is not how I would have handled this, or this is not how I would have spoken to an actor. I was very happy because I felt like I was better like at directing the other sex scenes in the film with the other actresses because I had already shot mine. And I was actually just genuinely able to walk in and be like, solidarity, like I was naked 2 days ago. So it's like, I'm not gonna ask you to do anything. I actually was very adamant during the shoot of like, I wanted to do the most of all the girls, not even because we necessarily were going to use it, but just because I didn't want to put anyone in a position where I was asking them to do more than I was willing to do. And so I was very much like upfront about that with the actresses, where I was like, I'm going to, like, I am a part of this. Like, I want to be just as vulnerable as you. I don't want you to ever feel like you're put in a position. So I think for that, like, psychologically, it was actually really validating. But yeah, it was like kind of in execution, the most ridiculous thing I've ever done because it was like we had to shoot it like with Chris and Trieste, who's the other actress. We had to like all be in it. So it was sort of like I think we all just like did a tequila shot because we were very like it was just so weird. And then I just had to like get in there and then like be like, okay, I'm gonna make out with you for a bit, and then like Trieste like watch me on monitor and try to memorize my motions, and then I'm gonna tap out and you jump in and kiss him. And I'm gonna watch you.
Poor Chris, man, what a rough job he has. All right, thank you so much. We got a line. These guys are going to introduce themselves to you, and hopefully they represent us well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Saul. I'm a junior here at UVU, and I just want to say, what an honor it is to meet you and to know that you did like pretty much almost everything here. So my question is, I'll just get right to it. What advice do you have for young up-and-coming filmmakers such as ourselves?
Yeah, so my biggest advice, I think, would honestly be that, like, don't talk yourself out of thinking that your incredibly personal story and perspective is not universal and not something that other people are going to get excited about. Because one of the things for me when I was walking into this was like, it never crossed my mind that people would actually respond. Like, I knew I wanted to make the film for me, and it was such a personal story for me, and I was so like obsessed with the crucible and everything. But it never like I didn't realize that like there were a lot of people, even like 45-year-old men who were coming to me and being like, hey, like I relate to this film, I actually see myself in this film. And I think that's when I started to realize that, like, honesty about what you're passionate about ends up being the thing that people like love about your work. And so many people think they have to like fit into a little box. That and like just getting out there and doing stuff, I think are two things. Because it's like, even if you don't have a lot of money and a ton of resources, like getting on the ground and just starting is always, I think, the way to go.
Okay. All right. And I asked that question especially because, you made this film when you were 22, and you're only 4 years older than me, and you had your debut at that age. And I hope that one day I get to be where you're at, to have a debut that incredible and that powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. It's very sweet.
Hi, Quinn.
Hi.
My name is Ashley Clements, and my question for you is, what's your biggest piece of advice for filmmakers, like specifically producers, who are looking to make the jump from producing short films to full-length features?
Oh, okay. I think that for me, I discovered that the amount of resources that you need and the amount of legal clearances that you need changes a lot from shorts to features. So it's like for us, because I mean, my mom honestly read this like massive book called Producer to Producer, where she learned like a ton. And we discovered that there was a lot of stuff we didn't want to deal with when trying to sell the film. That was like clearances on music and everything. So everything in the film is original. All the rap music, like every sound cue, like everything was produced for the film. And so that was something like understanding that if you make a feature that is potentially going to be sold, is going to potentially be distributed, that there's like just, I would advise like getting a lawyer, and then just know that like the scale of resources, like the quality of the sound mix, like everything is sort of ratcheted up in, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be insanely expensive. It's just almost like you have to kind of ask every favor of every person that you've ever met to pull, because I think you can pull off something impressive with not that much if all of your artistic departments are really strong. That was sort of our technique with Blame, is we did not have a lot of money, and we focused on getting all of the artistic department heads and all of the actors and everything to just be like so incredible, and finding people who are passionate so that we could kind of make it look like it was made for more than it was.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, my name is Zoe, and amazing film. Like, it was such a powerful story and so beautifully shot. I just loved it so much.
Thank you.
So I'm also an actress and a filmmaker. Like, I kind of want to do it all in the film industry. So sorry to ask another advice question, but what would be your advice for balancing all those different interests?
So are you talking about balancing them on like one specific project, or just in general?
Just in general, because I want to act and I want to make films. I want to write, direct. I want to be able to do all of it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think like if you're interested in everything, your own project is a really great place to start. Like, it's a great way to showcase your own strengths and to like create a character that is exciting for you to play, and like to be able to do that. I think being open to I think knowing that one thing I think that sometimes happens, this is something I was very worried about, and I think I prepped a lot in advance, is when you're multitasking, everything is like almost like a little bit of a handicap in every area. So it's like if you're directing and acting at the same time, you're only going to be able to do both to like a certain extent. So I would just recommend like doing a ton of prep if you're going to do a project where you're wearing multiple hats. So just like plan out all your shots ahead of time, or practice the scenes ahead of time, like do as much as you can, and then yeah, I think emotionally it makes sense that it all goes together. I think for me, I found it a little overwhelming, which is why I'm not typically in the projects I'm writing right now, just because it was like a little too many hats to wear for me. But I know that there's other people who really, really love it. So I think it's up to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, so fantastically unnerving film. Well done.
I love that.
It almost doesn't sound like a compliment, but you managed to make it seem endearing when it's just so fantastic. So in the current climate, I guess social climate around filmmakers, people just in positions of authority in general, you'll see we've had a lot of sexual misconduct issues, and I think the people who want to make sure that they're never on the end of that sort of train, the people who are in the right in those situations want to really make it obvious that they're in the right. I'm sure people have seen like pictures of Keanu Reeves taking like pictures with fans. He's got his hands clearly just obviously not on anybody because he wants to make sure. So I think in things that I've written about, I want to insert this this part of a character. So like, let's make it perfect. Let's make this character have absolutely no flaws. And so, in the situation where we've got a teacher that you're writing who's got these flaws, and he could potentially get in trouble. If I had written this film, I would have said, he has to say no. He has to really just say, I cannot legally do this. He says, this is just going to be a big problem. If I had written it, I would have found myself just inserting there. It probably would have ruined it. Did you ever have a moment where you were just like, just do the right thing, but then you say, well, he has to have this sort of mumbly, wishy-washy, like kind of, I guess, like, did you ever have a problem with that?
Well, I think that honestly, what was interesting about the film, because I started it when I was so young, is that my opinions on the decisions that he made in the film shifted as I worked on it. Because, and I actually I wrote an op-ed for IndieWire that was about sort of my perception of consent in the film and how it shifted so much through the process. Because when I first started writing it, I was really young and I didn't fully grasp the level of inherent power dynamic that was there between Abigail and the teacher. I think I saw it as a little bit more of like, well, they're sort of like, they sort of love each other, even though it's like they can't be together. And then as I got older and I was working on the film more, it just shifted. And obviously with like Melissa's backstory and everything that ends up coming out, it really shifted more into a story about consent and about girls who get taken advantage of. And obviously, I think with Jeremy's character, my intention was to show a character who the audience would feel morally torn about, because he on one hand presents almost more likable than even like the teenage boys are in the film, because he is kinder and more generous. But at the same time, the ending of the film is meant, I think I wanted the audience to feel almost lured into feeling okay with it. And then at the end, when we discover what happened to Melissa and we see the scene where Abigail is just like kind of so young and vulnerable and like crying with him in the bedroom, like we're so rooting for that to not happen there. And I think it's a shift in the last like 15-20 minutes of the film where I want people to kind of go from, so there are people who have said to us at test screenings, like, I was kind of rooting for them for a part of the movie, and then go like, well, but then at the end, it like flips it back on you and kind of goes, well, as the audience, where does that put you? So I don't know, maybe I like making people uncomfortable, but I think that's why I avoided there being like an extremely moralistic stance from Jeremy, because I think he does ultimately do as right of the thing as he kind of could have in that situation. It's like, it is very gray, and it's intended to be gray because it's supposed to kind of reflect back on the audience.
It's a wonderful answer. Fantastic thoughts to consume from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure, say your name, guys.
Hi, I'm Cade. Great film. I was not expecting to enjoy being so uncomfortable for so long. My question is from like a writing and directing standpoint. What kind of prep work do you do before you start like tackling a project? Like, it's really, I'm having a hard time like thinking like how to word this, but like, do you kind of get the question?
Yeah, I can talk to what I do now because I think I've learned so much more since I was working on Blame, since that was my first film script. So usually when I write scripts now, I write out an outline. So I'll usually, and I don't like pressure myself to stick to it. In fact, a lot of times I'll discover major structural issues within that stage and I'll end up scrapping half of it and just writing. But I will usually at least attempt to write a sort of play-by-play outline, which is usually way more detailed than anyone wants me to be, and is like, she walks down the street and does this, and then she goes here. And really what people want is like 1 page of bullet points. But yeah, I do that because I feel it helps me work through the journey of the characters kind of before I jump in fully and make sure that I'm like kind of connecting everything. I tend to write a lot of mysteries now. And I think that with mysteries and with TV shows as well, it's important to kind of know like a big trajectory. So I usually do that, but then I throw a lot of it out and I start writing from the gut, and I sort of do like a middle ground where I'll go back and I'll look at my outline and I'll write from outline, but I'll more use it as like a loose guideline for what it could be as opposed to like a literal interpretation scene by scene.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Hi, Quinn.
Hi.
I guess I'm in frame here. My name is Daniel, and I have a very.
Closer to the.
All right. I was a little back there.
Dan is tall.
Yeah, I am. That's what I was wondering. So, I have a very interesting question about when it comes to the music in the film, because I noticed there was a lot of music, and it set the mood in a lot of scenes very well, as well as a lot of the transitions. I was curious, what part in production did you have the idea of putting like all these music pieces? Was it more in like during the production phase or the post-production phase?
Yeah, so in post we had used a temp score in the first cut. So just like finding music that it started just becoming about finding pieces that felt in the world of the film. And then honestly with score, I ended up meeting my composer through kind of just like a twist of fate. It was after shooting, and I was in Montreal, and he was playing a concert, and like a free concert, and I just walked in off the street, and I heard him playing, and I just immediately knew that he was the one, which it sounds insane, but then I went up to him after the show and I was like, hi, I know this sounds crazy and I've never met you and I barely even, I guess I knew he spoke English because he was singing in English, but he is like French Canadian, and I was like, this is crazy, but I'm a filmmaker and I think your sound is perfect for a movie I'm working on. And he was like, oh, well, I actually am a film composer. I do this also. Like I have a band, but I'm also a film composer. And I was like, that's crazy. So we exchanged information. I was like, please email me. Like I need it, like, please do it. And I was praying. And then I got a message from him within a couple hours. He was like, send me the film. And so I sent it to him and he loved it. And we started working together. And then I ended up going and like staying with him for weeks on end in the forest in Montreal. And I was very involved in the music because I had a pretty strong vision. He's an incredible musician. He plays all of the instruments in the score. So we worked together, and I was really, really hands-on, and oftentimes would like make noises or vague sentences that are not references to any sort of actual musical terms. And he would just, I'd be like, make it sound like fall. And he'd be like, okay. So yeah, it wasn't, I think in the future, I'd love to start with music sooner, like while shooting. And now I usually make playlists ahead of times when I'm writing a script. But no, it was definitely in post when I worked with him.
I see. Thank you so much for the information. I actually work a little bit with music, so that's why I was a little curious about that.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
How are you holding up? Are you holding up all right? Wayne?
I'm good.
My name's Parker. All right. I've said this probably to a couple people tonight, but my favorite part was when Melissa and Abigail fight in the classroom for the first time, and she storms out. And it's a super dramatic moment where it's just following her face as she's stomping down the hall. For some reason, just the clomping of her chunky heels on tile was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I loved it.
It is.
When you're writing or working on something, when do you no longer think it's trash and realize that it's good enough to be made? Because something I hear a lot is like, once you think you're good enough, that's when everyone gets better than you. So what's that cutoff for you?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I would definitely describe my process as like, I think I saw like a tweet about it or something one time where it was literally like, being a writer is like start of draft, I am the greatest writer in the world, like midpoint of draft, this is the worst piece of shit ever. Then it's like, then it goes back. It's just like an endless roller coaster. I definitely think it shifts, and I think it's good for it to shift. Otherwise, if you just are like, this is the best the whole time, it's probably not. But I definitely have I get like a real rush when I'm writing first drafts of stuff and I'm like convinced it is incredible. And then there is like that moment where I read it back to myself like 2 weeks later. I'm like, oh no, this needs a lot of work. But yeah, I mean, I tend to be pretty hard on myself, but at the same time, I think I lack, when I get really close to my writing, I have a hard time self-editing sometimes and like knowing if a scene is bad, especially when I've been working for like maybe a few weeks straight on like a specific section and I just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I kind of hit a wall. So at that point, I usually bounce my scripts off of my mom, who reads them, and Nadia Alexander, who plays Melissa in the film. They are the people who read my scripts, and they're both very hard on me in a loving way. And yeah, and they're just like very honest with me. I like people in my life who will just be straight up with me when stuff is bad, because at that point, that means that they actually care about making it good. And then usually I take that kind of those notes and I apply them and I work really hard, and I always kind of go back to like the meta of what it's really about, and yeah, just do that a bunch until I get somewhere.
Just until the people you trust stop shitting on it.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, that is sort of what it is like if you have people in your life who you know are going to tell you if it's bad, then when they stop telling you it's bad, you're like, okay.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
That's my very professional advice.
Hi, I'm Zach. Thank you for that film. It was really great. My main question, because it just looks really high quality and everything feels really high quality. I'm in the process of making a short film, and I'm wondering where to get money besides my rich uncle. So I'm wondering, what was the process like for you? How did you go about getting funding, and what was that like?
All right. So this is kind of a crazy story, and I would like to preface it by saying that I do not advise doing this. So I started seeking funding when I was 18. I was sending the film out to production companies pretty much unsolicited. I did actually get a couple bites. I went in for a meeting somewhere that was willing to give me like just not enough to make it, like micro budget. And it was like too short of a timeline where they wanted to shoot it that summer. And it just like wouldn't have worked out. So that didn't end up happening. We were pushing because we had to shoot in the summer because it's like in a high school. And that was my old high school that they let us film at. So I ended up getting an investor who was a director who I'd worked with in the past, who I had done an indie with, and who agreed to be the financier. He was starting a film fund, and he was investing in like 5 different features. And he was like, I will finance yours, and we will do an ultra low budget, fully funded. And so I was like, great. So we moved forward with him. We got contracts done, hired a lawyer, all of that, and moved forward through casting, through hiring our entire crew, booking all our locations, all of that. And then during basically our first week, he ghosted us, and we never got any money.
Wow.
So the entire film was paid for with my college fund, and with which was primarily just money. Like my mom was very good because I started acting as a kid, so I had an income when I was young. So my mom was very good about putting all that money away for me when I was younger. And then I had done, luckily, like a year on a CBS show as an actor, and I had saved everything I made because I was planning on like moving out and the things that normal people do. And so all of that money just went towards the film. And we were definitely we did not have much of a choice, but we could have pulled, but it would have been we would have pulled production in like the middle of the process, which would have been kind of the worst thing I could imagine. And I remember having a conversation about it with my mom and just being like, I would genuinely rather be completely broke than have a broken spirit and let this thing that is like my dream and is happening right now fall apart literally right in front of me. That said, would not necessarily say to other people invest all your own personal money and make a film, but at the same time, for me, we were able to sell the film at festivals and recoup the costs, and now I have the career that I have because of it. So I am obviously very grateful that I made that decision, but it was one of those things that I did pretty much exactly the opposite of what everyone advises you to do.
Gotcha. Well, cool. I will keep that in mind.
Honestly, rich uncle might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
We got 3 more people, all right?
All right, I'm feeling pumped.
Good.
Hi, my name is Kim Neri.
Whoa, hold on there.
Okay, I'm kind of short, but yeah. So I'm actually just new to the film program, but it's one of the things that I've realized within the past few months that I really want to pursue and not give up on. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask is, how do you look at your movies now that you've completed one of your own? How different is it than it was before?
Do you mean how is my perception of the film that I made different now that it's made, or how is my perception of what I'm working on now?
Yeah. So what is your perception of films in general now that you've made your own as to before?
I think it's a mixture between. I mean, I definitely feel appreciation for the difficulty more, I think, because now that I've genuinely done so much of the process, like, and have been hands-on in so many steps, I think I actually genuinely appreciate things I wasn't noticing before, like really good sound mix, or like a really difficult location, or a crazy one-er shot where there's like all these whip pans. Like I'm genuinely like, how did they get the dolly to do that? Like I do get in my head about it, and it can kind of partially take me out of a film, but then also partially it brings me into noticing details. Like I'll just notice really specific stuff. Like I was watching Uncut Gems the other day, and I was like pointing out, I was like, did you notice how the nightclub scene was colored to match the gem? It's like I'll just notice the nerdiest stuff because I think I'm like trained to pay attention to that now. But on the flip side, I think it can also make me, it's like it makes me more appreciative, but then I can also end up being harder on things if I think, oh, I would have done that differently, or oh, I feel like I know how they could have fixed this like structural issue. So it's like a mixed bag. It does feel a little like I'm working sometimes when I watch movies, but like that's not necessarily bad.
All right. Thank you so much. That movie is great.
Oh. Hi, Quinn. My name's Taylor. So first, I just want to say I am so impressed you made it at 20. I'm 22, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. That's so cool. So, and then Nadia, her performance was fantastic. So, like, just want to give her a shout out. I don't know if you still talk to her, but tell her I said great job. So, okay, so I know you talked a little bit earlier about the process of editing the script and getting it ready for screen. And I'm in Duane's editing class, and one of the things we've really been talking about is killing your darlings. And as you are the writer, also the director, and then the editor, I'm really curious to hear specifically about when you were filming it. Were there moments where you're actually there with the camera and everything, and you're like, what I wrote just isn't quite working, we're gonna have to fix something? And then on the flip side, when you're in the editing bay, you're like, no, this scene is just not there, because you mentioned it was like your first time editing. I don't know if it'd be something you're like, I don't know if I'm just editing this right, or I'm like, I'm just gonna have to cut the scene altogether. So I'm just really curious to hear about how you worked through those issues.
Yeah, I slaughter my darlings all the time, not attached to any of the darlings. Yes, my philosophy is very much like I just follow my gut, and I also want the actors and the other creatives on set to follow their gut. So it's like with a script, I'm very not precious about my scripts. Like if there's something that is really important to me, I will defend it. But I usually will like approach a scene by sitting down with actors and having them read it, and then being like, okay, what feels natural and what is not working for you? We would very often sit down, read a scene out loud. I'd be like, hate this line, moving this line up. I want a bunch of improv. We did a lot of improv too. Like even if it didn't all make it into the film, it just warmed everybody up and made it just feel a little bit more natural. But yeah, I mean, I would do a lot of rewrites with the actors. They were really involved and they had a lot of input, which I love, and that's what I want. Me and Chris just would do crazy, and we'd like scream at each other. We would do like whatever. We would just like do all this stuff to like get into character. We would like when we were shooting fight scenes, we would just be like, we would like push each other. Like it was so funny just to like get in the mood so we could have our energy up. But yeah, and then in the edit, there were definitely sequences that weren't working, but I think a really good trick is when you're the editor, you have infinite amount of ability to change things. So we would often find like if a scene didn't work, it might work great as part of a montage, but not good as its own scene. Like a lot of times when we would have a scene that would be like, it's like you put music under it, you cut it faster, you put it in with 3 other scenes, and you move it later. And so we would shift things around. There's even scenes in the movie that were kind of pieced together from footage from like a few different scenes that we created a moment that didn't exist in the script through like raw footage that we had. So we definitely played some tricks to get the flow right, because it is, I think, a very pacing specific kind of film where the tone is also quite like, it's a little melodrama, it's a little satire, and it's like it gets it like toes that line. And so it was like we had to be very careful in the edit of never going too far in one of those directions.
Awesome, super cool to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I lied before. I said there were 3 more or whatever. Now there's 1 more beyond this one. So there's 2 more.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey there, Quinn. I've just got a quick one right now. I just wanted to know during this whole process, what was the most fun for you?
I really liked the edit. I know that sounds ironic because like it's so solitary, but I thought it was incredible just like watching it come together. Scoring it was also, I mean, all of post I found really fun. The scoring process was just awesome because it was like I was in this like winter wonderland in Montreal, like doing the music. It was so cool. Doing the edit was a lot of fun because it was just like watching it come together in a low stress environment, knowing that we had it. Like no one could take the footage away from us and just being like, okay, like we did it. We pulled it because the shoot was, even though there was a lot of fun moments, it was also just incredibly stressful because it was just a very challenging shoot when you have like no money. And so there was a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes that like doesn't necessarily show in the film, but was very hard when you're wearing all the different hats. And so in the edit, it was just like really satisfying to look at the footage and the performances and be like, oh, this is so exciting. This all is working. So yeah, I think that was my favorite part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I give you a break and you just sit back and relax and look at what you made? So that's cool. So yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Am I in the right? Oh, okay. I think that's good. Hi, my name's Katie. Oh, it's not good.
No, we gotta get good
Okay,
framing.
my name's Katie, and I like to write a lot. And so kudos to you for like huge round of applause for being able to be the writer, director, and editor. Like that's just awe-striking to me, because as a writer, I know that there's like this awesome element to writing where you can start a story and then just go to the end and you know how it wants to end, and then you can write the middle, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in order, or you can write it in order.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of that idea, it kind of goes more into the directing aspect of it. My question is more of how did you like film it and like what order? Because I know very few films that were able to film it chronologically. And so going off of that idea is like, since most films can't do that, what would you say is one of the hardest things about filming it like out of order, and like one of the best things to try and like prevent that or like help combat that?
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely did not shoot it in order, but at the same time, we made a lot of efforts. I think it's hard to shake, like when you come from an acting background, it's hard to shake like I understand so much, I think, about what works for actors, and just because I did it for so many years. So I really wanted the most emotionally challenging scenes for all the actors to be at the end of the shoot. So we were lucky enough to be able to schedule the like climax scene with Nadia in the principal's office, that scene as one of our last days, as well as the party sequence in the basement was the last day of shooting, because I wanted the actors to all be really, really comfortable with each other. And Chris and I shot our sex scene and our goodbye scene on the last day of our shooting together, because we shot him out in 7 days straight. Because that was the only gap he had in his schedule with filming. He was filming until like the day before, and the day he was insanely generous to like come and do this movie in his downtime. But yeah, it was intense. But so I always tried to push all of those things to the tail end of shoots, and whenever I could with the locations, to focus on starting with the easiest scenes for people to warm up to each other. But I think as far as combating the issues of that, I think getting people together ahead of time is really helpful. We didn't have time to do full rehearsals, but we did have enough time to get people together for like a photo shoot. I had some go to lunch together, to like get some pre-bonding so that there'd be some chemistry on screen. And just like working with the actors as much as possible, like getting them together as much as possible, so that when you do have to jump into like a best friend scene on day one, give them a bunch of improv, give them a bunch of, make them do silly stuff. I would make people play like improv games and stuff just to keep everyone fresh. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, all right, Quinn. I do have one more question here.
Right.
I know. Just last, really, because I was curious. Did you do any pickups at all after edit?
We did, but it was minimal because they cost $0. We shot, which don't ask me even how we did that, because there's like things I shouldn't say. We shot pickups of just inserts, and they were inserts that we felt were needed. The opening of the film is largely inserts that we shot later, because like the opening shots of like the play, like Sybil and everything, like we did those later because the original opening of the film is a oneer and it was very slow. And I don't think any of us realized how slow it was going to feel in comparison to the kind of fast pace of the film. We thought it was, I think, going to be a little bit more indie in pacing. And then when I cut it and it felt quite fast, the opening just felt completely out of line. So then we changed that and did some pickups, as well as like some texting inserts and stuff that were to help explain things that people were confused about in pickups. Like there was just like slight things that were like someone didn't realize who someone was texting because a line was confusing, so we had to cut to an insert of like who they were texting, like stuff like that. Really small nominal things.
Cool. All shot in like your bedroom probably and stuff.
Yeah, like shot in my parents' living room in New Jersey, with like a board to like that we had painted with the same wall color.
Okay, well that's great. Thank you so much for your time. It's such a good film. I do want to say, since you missed out on your college education, UVU is very cheap, and you could come out here and you could probably test out a lot of the classes, you know, just by turning this in. So consider it. We'll adopt you.
Sounds good.
So thank you so much, and have a great
you.
night. Thanks for staying up late with us.
You guys have been amazing. Thank you for all the sweet words.
Okay,
Honestly,
we'll
so
do
nice.
another little pan here where you can wave and.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
All right. Have a good night. Thank
All right,
you.
you too. Have a good night.